The night my apartment burned, I was not home. I was at Mercy Oaks Hospice Center, charting a dying patient's final breaths because that was my job, to document what other people were too broken to say. But when I stood outside Willow Bend Apartments in my scrubs, watching everything I owned turn black behind police tape, my mother did not ask if I was hurt. She asked if Nana Winnie's will papers had burned. And 3 weeks later, when the arson report came back, it was not my mistake they found in the ashes. It was a broken charm from my sister's key ring, lying right where the fire started. Chapter 1. The fire, the phone call, and the question about the key to the fire took everything I owned in one night. My mother took less than 90 seconds to decide it was not her problem. By the time I reached Willow Bend Apartments, it was 2:47 in the morning, and the sky above the second floor was still stained gray from smoke. I had just finished a double shift at Mercy Oaks Hospice Center, where I worked as a hospice RN and clinical documentation nurse. 12 hours of medication checks, family updates, end-of-life notes, and charting every small change in people whose bodies were slowly letting go. I was still wearing navy scrubs. My hair smelled like hand sanitizer. My last clear thought before the call came had been that Mrs. Harlan's breathing had finally settled after midnight, and I needed to add one more note before I drove home. Then Owen Baird, the manager at Willow Bend, called and said my building was on fire. He did not say damaged. He did not say smoke. He said fire. And after that, my brain stopped taking in full sentences. I drove back with both hands locked around the steering wheel, the way I used to hold a pulse ox sensor on a restless patient's finger. Too tight, because I was trying to make something stay steady. The closer I got, the more the night changed. First the orange reflection on the low clouds, then the red lights moving over the brick buildings, then the smell, that wet, bitter, chemical smoke that crawls into your throat before you can even see what burned. The parking lot was full of people who looked half awake and fully terrified. A woman in a bathrobe held a cat against her chest. An older man stood barefoot on the cold asphalt, staring at the firefighters like he had forgotten how to ask a question. Someone had wrapped a toddler in a beach towel. Water ran down the curb in black streams. My apartment was on the second floor, or it had been. The windows were punched dark. Smoke smeared the siding above them. A firefighter moved through what used to be my living room, his flashlight cutting across the wall where my small bookshelf had stood. From the parking lot, I could see nothing clearly, only pieces. A warped curtain rod, a blackened edge of the desk where I paid bills, the corner where my metal filing cabinet had been. The framed picture of Nana Winnie that used to sit on the shelf near the hall, gone or hidden under soot. I did not scream. I did not fall to my knees. People expect that sometimes, as if grief has to perform to be real. But I had spent years sitting beside families when a monitor went quiet, and I knew shock did not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looked like a woman in scrubs, standing perfectly still, while every ordinary thing she owned turned into steam and ash. I had watched daughters lose mothers, husbands lose wives, sons lose fathers. I had written time of death in clean black letters while someone sobbed into a hospital blanket beside me. But I had never stood outside in the cold and watched my own life become something the fire department would later inventory by room. My first instinct was not smart. It was not strategic. It was not even logical. I called my mother. Elaine Vale answered on the fifth ring, her voice thick and annoyed from sleep. She was 64, retired from the church office, and had a way of sounding morally exhausted before anyone had even explained the emergency. "Mom, my apartment burned," I said. "I am outside Willow Bend. I do not think I can go back in. I do not have anywhere to sleep." There was a long breath on the other end, not a gasp, not panic. A breath like I had interrupted something inconvenient. "Well, Merritt, did you call your insurance?" I closed my eyes. The smoke made them sting anyway. I said I had not even spoken to everyone yet. I had just gotten here. She sighed. "You probably had something too close to an outlet. You work those long shifts and you forget things. You need to let the professionals handle it." In the background, my father, Ray, muttered something I could barely hear. Then my mother covered the phone poorly and repeated it back to me. Your father wants to know if you have renter's insurance. He did not take the phone. He did not ask where I was standing, whether I was hurt, whether I had a coat, whether I needed him to come get me. Just renter's insurance, as if my life had become a claim number before it was allowed to be a crisis. Then Elaine said the sentence that froze me harder than the October air. This is not our problem at 3 a.m, Merritt. You always know how to handle yourself. I looked up at the black hole where my bedroom window had been. I could almost see my old life inside it. The quilt Nana Winnie made folded at the foot of the bed. The mug I used for tea on late charting nights. The work shoes I left by the door, because hospice homes had taught me never to track the outside too far inside. I said nothing. My mother must have mistaken my silence for agreement, because her voice changed. It sharpened. It became awake. Those papers from Nana Winnie, she said. The Hart House papers. Were they in there? Did they burn? That was the first real fear I heard in her voice. Not fear for me, fear for paper. I stood in the parking lot with smoke in my hair and a borrowed blanket around my shoulders, and I understood that my mother had reached past her daughter to check on documents. I told her someone from the fire investigation unit was coming over and ended the call before she could ask again. A few minutes later, Daniel Rivas walked toward me with a notebook in one hand and a flashlight clipped to his jacket. He was 54, square-shouldered, calm in the way people get when they have seen too many disasters to waste motion. He did not speak to me like I was fragile. I appreciated that more than I expected. He asked how long I had lived there. Since 2021, I told him. He asked if I had been home when the fire started. No. I was at Mercy Oaks. I had just finished a shift. Candles, space heater, overloaded outlets, old wiring, stove left on. No candles, no heater, no stove. I had not cooked that night. I barely had time to microwave soup most nights. He listened without nodding too much. Then he looked past me, up toward the second floor, at the corner of my apartment where the crews had been moving carefully. That corner, he said. What was there? My filing cabinet. What kind? Metal, 2 drawers. Personal records, lease papers, insurance scans, inventory, medical license copies, some family documents. He wrote that down, I added. Cleaning supplies were under the kitchen sink, opposite side. No heater near it. No outlet overloaded. No candle. He glanced at me then, and I saw the first small shift in his face. Not suspicion of me. Attention. He asked if anyone else had access to my apartment. I almost said no. Then my stomach dropped. 1 week earlier, my sister, Blythe Pruitt, had called me while I was between patient visits. She was 36, a part-time real estate assistant when it suited her, and a full-time emergency whenever our mother needed a reason to forgive her. She had asked if she could borrow my spare key from the lockbox by the mailboxes. She said she wanted to stop by and water my plants because I had been working too much. Plants. I owned one pothos in a chipped white pot near the sink, and that thing had survived 3 years of neglect like it had a personal grudge against death. The request had felt strange. But I had been tired, and Blythe had sounded unusually sweet, and a lifetime of being the reasonable daughter had trained me to ignore small discomforts if naming them would create drama. So I gave her the lockbox code. I told Daniel she took the spare on October 11. He wrote Blythe Pruitt in his notebook, then drew a line beneath it. He did not accuse her. He did not even look surprised. Do not call her, he said. Do not ask her anything. If she texts, keep it. If she calls, write down what she says. The instruction landed heavier than comfort would have. A neighbor I barely knew handed me an old brown coat that smelled like laundry soap and cigarette smoke. I thanked her because it was easier than crying. By sunrise, the firefighters had gone from urgent to methodical, and Owen told me I would not be allowed back inside until the scene was cleared. There was nowhere to go. I checked into the Route 42 motor lodge with my driver's license, 1 debit card, and scrubs that smelled like someone else's disaster. The room had yellow light, a humming mini-fridge, carpet cleaner over old smoke, and a floral bedspread that looked older than half my patients. I set the borrowed coat on the chair and my small plastic bag on the bed. Then I sat down, opened the Notes app on my phone, and made a new file. I named it Timeline. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second. At Mercy Oaks, I taught new nurses that charting was not about mistrust. It was about protecting the truth before fear, grief, or convenience could reshape it. So I wrote the first line, October 18, 2024, fire. Mom asked about heart papers before asking if I was safe. I saved it. The phone buzzed in my hand before the screen went dark. Blythe. Chapter 2. The sister who wanted the papers and the family that needed me silent for a second. I let it ring against my palm while the motel heater coughed warm air into the room. I had obeyed Daniel Rivas for exactly 8 minutes. Do not call her. Do not ask her anything. If she texts, keep it. He had not said what to do if she called first. I answered because part of me was still the older sister who had been trained to pick up, even when every tired bone in my body knew better. Merritt, oh my God, Blythe said, already crying. Mom just told me. Are you okay? Her voice sounded wet and breathless, but not messy. Blythe had always known how to cry in a way that made other people move toward her. I'm alive, I said. The apartment's bad. I don't know what's left. There was one small pause, not long enough for grief, just long enough for calculation. Was Nana's metal box in there? She asked. The Hart House papers, and that fireproof case you keep in your closet. Did any of that survive? The motel room seemed to shrink around me. The fireproof case was not something Blythe should have known about. She had not been inside my apartment for more than a year, at least not according to her. She had said more than once that my place was too far across town, too hard with the kids, too inconvenient unless she needed me to drop something off at her house. How do you know about the fireproof case? I asked. She gave a soft, nervous laugh. I don't know. Mom must have mentioned it. You know how she talks. I did know how my mother talked. She never mentioned anything unless it served her. Blythe, my apartment just burned. I know. I'm not trying to be insensitive. It's just, those papers are important, and everyone is going to ask. Everyone. That was how Blythe hid herself in a room. She made her own fear sound like a committee. Then she softened her voice. You'll be okay, Merritt. You always land on your feet. There it was, the family blessing that had always sounded like a compliment, until I learned to hear the lock inside it. When Blythe cried at 11 because she forgot a project, my mother drove to Walmart at 9 at night for poster board. When Blythe overdrafted her account at 23, my father called it a rough season. When Blythe had Harper and then Nolan, every bill, every bad choice, every burst of anger came wrapped in the same excuse. She has kids. But when I was tired, I was responsible. When I needed help, I was strong. In my family, you always land on your feet meant nobody had to catch me. I told Blythe I needed to sleep and ended the call before she could ask about the papers again. Sleep did not come. Instead, Nana Winnie did. Winifred Hart had been 86 when she died in March of 2024, and she had lived in Hart House on Sycamore Lane for more than 50 years. It was a narrow old house with creaking stairs, stubborn windows, and a front porch that smelled like rain and peppermint tea. Nana had taught elementary school music for 32 years, and even near the end, when her hands trembled too much to play piano, she could still hum the first note of any hymn and make the room remember the rest. From January 2023 until the week she died, I cared for her. 14 months of pill organizers, appointment binders, soft food, clean sheets, late-night breathing checks, insurance calls, and sitting in the dark when the pain made her afraid to be alone. I did not do it because I expected a reward. I did it because Nana had been the one adult in my childhood who never called my quietness maturity. She called it loneliness. Elaine told people at church that the whole family cared for her mother. She would stand near the fellowship hall coffee urn and say, "We're all taking turns with Mama." That was not true. Blythe visited twice with the kids in matching sweaters, took pictures in Nana's living room, posted them with a heart emoji, and left before the medication alarm went off. Ray fixed a loose railing once and mentioned it for 3 months. Elaine organized meal trains she did not eat from and prayer updates she did not stay long enough to deserve. The one who stayed was me. One night, around 2 in the morning, Nana reached for my hand while I was changing the water glass beside her bed. Merritt, she whispered. People remember who cries at the funeral. I remember who sits here after midnight. I tried to smile and told her not to talk like that. She squeezed my hand with more strength than I expected. Some things need to be written down before other people rewrite them. A week later, I drove her to Keene and Lowell Estate Law. Marla Keene met us at a conference table with a yellow legal pad and a voice that did not condescend to old women. After that, I drove Nana to First County Bank twice. Nana told me only what she wanted me to know. Paperwork, she said. Boring until it saves you. 1 month after the funeral, Marla read the will. Hart House, appraised at about $428,000, went to me. Not divided equally. Not held in trust for family discussion. Not dependent on Elaine's approval or Blythe's tears. Blythe stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. She was confused at the end, Blythe said. Merritt had her alone for months. Elaine put a hand on Blythe's arm and looked at me like I had embarrassed everyone by existing. We can discuss this privately, she said. No need to make it ugly. Ray stared down at his hands. He had always been gifted at letting silence look like neutrality. I remembered Marla walking me to the hallway afterward and saying quietly, "Your grandmother prepared more carefully than they understand." At the time, I did not know what she meant. After the fire, I learned. By mid-morning, the motel walls felt too thin and my borrowed coat felt like a costume. I drove to my parents' house because shock makes fools of people. It sends you back to doors you already know will not open. Because some child-sized part of you still thinks home should mean something in an emergency. Elaine opened the front door halfway. Warm coffee smell drifted out behind her. A morning show murmured from the living room. "Can I stay a few nights?" I asked. "Just until the insurance gets moving." Her eyes flicked down to my Walmart bag, then over my shoulder, as if the disaster might be contagious. "The spare room is full," she said. "Harper and Nolan's things are in there. They don't live here. They stay over sometimes." Ray appeared behind her in sweatpants and a faded Ohio State sweatshirt. "You know how to handle yourself." "Merritt," he said gently, which somehow made it worse. Elaine lowered her voice. "And Blythe is dealing with a lot right now. Please don't drag more drama into this family." My apartment had burned less than 12 hours earlier. My mother had already assigned the word drama to my need for a bed. I looked past her into the house where I had grown up. The hallway was the same. The framed church directory photo still hung crooked near the stairs. Nothing inside had burned. Nothing inside had moved for me. "Okay," I said. That was all the next day. I went back to Mercy Oaks. I bought navy scrubs at Walmart because every set I owned was either ash or smoke. The fabric was stiff, and the tag scratched my neck. I stood in the staff bathroom for 3 minutes, trying to make myself look like a nurse, instead of a woman who had slept beside a vending machine hum. Autumn Monroe found me in the break room. She was the hospice chaplain. 45, calm-eyed, with silver starting at her temples and a way of seeing through any sentence that began with, "I'm fine." "Do you have somewhere safe to sleep?" she asked. "I'm fine." Ada tilted her head. Sometimes fine is just another word, for nobody asked carefully enough. I looked away because kindness was more dangerous than cruelty that morning. My first patient was Lillian Price, 78. End-stage heart failure, still sharp enough to tease the aides and weak enough that lifting her water cup tired her out. I adjusted her blanket and checked her medication record. She watched my face. "Nurse Merritt," she said, "who is taking care of you today?" I almost dropped the pen. A dying woman in a hospice bed had asked me the question my mother had skipped. I smiled, because that was what nurses do when they cannot afford to break. "Today I'm taking care of you, Miss Lillian." That is not what I asked. I charted her pain level, her breathing, her intake. Clean words, safe words. Words that held the room together. That evening, my phone started lighting up. My cousin Ren Vale texted first. "Blythe says you're using the fire to get sympathy and keep Nana's house. Is that true?" I opened the family group chat and watched the story form without me. Blythe had written that Nana was not herself near the end, that I controlled the papers, that maybe if my copies burned, it was a sign we should stop fighting and split things fairly. Elaine added, Blythe has children, a mortgage, and real bills. I hope everyone remembers that. An aunt wrote, "The house should stay in the family." Someone else wrote, "Merritt, don't let money ruin blood." I did not answer. I screenshotted everything. One message. Then another. Then another. They called it peace. But their peace had always been purchased with my portion. I added each screenshot to the timeline. Near midnight, an email came from June Keller at Prairie Mutual Renters Insurance, scheduling a claim review for the next morning. Before I could close the laptop, Daniel Rivas texted. "Scene not cleared as accidental. Keep your records. Don't engage with family." I opened my cloud drive and found the folder labeled Apartment Inventory 2024. The first photo loaded slowly on the motel Wi-Fi. My living room appeared before the fire. The blue chair, the cheap bookshelf, the metal filing cabinet in the corner, and on top of it, clear as daylight, was a copy of the Hart House Papers. Chapter 3, documented, preserved, and the first proof they couldn't explain that picture did two things at once. It proved I had kept my records clean, and it proved exactly why someone might have wanted that corner to burn. The next morning, June Keller arrived at the Route 42 Motor Lodge with a leather folder, a tablet, and the careful expression of a woman who had spent 16 years walking into other people's disasters. She was 52, with short gray hair, practical shoes, and a voice that sounded kind without becoming soft. I had expected pity. Instead, she asked for documentation. For the first time since the fire, I almost smiled. "How much do you have?" she asked. I turned my laptop around. Photos of every room from July. Receipts for the furniture I bought new. Serial numbers for the laptop, printer, television, and medical reference books. A spreadsheet with replacement estimates. Cloud backups of lease papers, renter's insurance, and personal inventory. June looked at the screen, then at me. "I've been doing this for 16 years, she said. "Most renters do not have a file this clean." "I do clinical documentation," I said. "At work, if it isn't written down, someone can say it never happened." June's face changed in a small way, not pity. Recognition. "Then you already understand insurance." She reviewed the inventory, asked about smoke damage, clothing, electronics, professional licenses, shoes, medications, even the food in the pantry. I answered like I was giving report to the next nurse at shift change. Clean, specific. No guessing if I could help it. When she reached the fire section, her voice slowed. "The property claim should move faster because your records are unusually strong. But the cause is still marked undetermined. Pending investigation." I looked up. "What does that mean exactly?" June tapped the tablet with one finger. "It means the investigator has not cleared it as electrical, cooking-related, heater-related, or accidental. It does not mean they know everything yet. It means they are not comfortable calling it simple." Simple. Nothing about the way my mother had asked about those papers felt simple. After June left, I opened my timeline and added a new line. Cause not accidental. Origin near file cabinet. I stared at the words for a long time before I saved them. 2 hours later, I sat across from Daniel Rivas at the Montgomery County Fire Investigation Unit. The building smelled like coffee, paper, and old smoke. Daniel spread a printed layout of my apartment across the table. He did not dramatize anything. That made it worse. He pointed to the living room corner. "Most accidental fires tell you what they are. Outlet failure. Appliance. Space heater. Stove. Something gives you a source." He moved his finger to the area where my filing cabinet had stood. "Your fire started low and tight here. Concentrated. Deep burn pattern. Not near a major outlet. Not where you said you stored cleaning supplies. Not consistent with a candle or heater." I swallowed. "So what does that mean?" "It means the burn pattern is not telling the story of an accident." He looked at me directly. "Samples went to the lab to test for accelerant. I am not saying who. I am saying somebody wanted the fire to start in that corner." The room stayed very quiet. I told him again about Blythe taking the spare key from the lockbox on October 11. Then I remembered something I had not told anyone yet. "I called a locksmith," I said. Daniel looked up from his notes. "When?" "October 16. I felt weird after Blythe asked for the key. Not enough to accuse her of anything. Just weird. They couldn't get me on the schedule until October 19. Daniel wrote that down. The fire was October 18. I know. He did not say I should have moved faster. He did not say I should have known. He just said, "You saw a red flag and acted. Someone else acted faster than the locksmith." That sentence stayed with me because it did not blame me for losing a race I had not known I was in. As I was leaving, I remembered the camera. "There's a hallway camera on the second floor," I said. "Above the fire door. I do not know if it sees my apartment door, but it might." Daniel straightened. "Who controls it?" "Owen Baird, building manager. Call him. Ask him to preserve everything from October 11th through the fire. Do not ask him to send it to you." I called Owen from the parking lot. He sounded tired and scared. "Merritt, I can't just hand over footage. The building's insurance is already asking questions. I do not want to get sued." "I'm not asking you to give it to me," I said. "I'm asking you not to let it disappear." He sighed. "The system keeps footage for 21 days, but it overwrites in blocks if the server gets full. Then preserve it. I need law enforcement to request it." I looked at Daniel, who was standing 10 feet away, already listening. "He's here," I said. Within an hour, a deputy met Owen at Willowbend. I stood outside the management office while Owen signed a preservation form with hands that shook slightly. The original footage was exported, labeled, sealed, and placed into an evidence bag. I did not touch it. I did not ask for a copy. I watched it disappear into the system where evidence belonged. Still, when Daniel walked out, I could not stop myself. "Was there anything on it?" "Not for you yet," he said. "Daniel." His voice softened, but only a little. "If you know too much too early, your family may hear it in your voice. Keep your case clean, Merritt." "My case, not my grief, not my family drama. My case." I went back to the motel and sat on the bed with my phone face down for almost 10 minutes. Then it buzzed, a text from Blythe. "Mom said the fire started near your file cabinet." "That's so weird. Did Nana's documents burn?" I did not move. The official fire report was not public. June had not been given that detail. Owen knew there was heavy damage, but he did not know the official point of origin. I had not told Elaine. I had not told Ray. I had not told anyone in the family that Daniel was focused on the filing cabinet corner. But Blythe knew. I typed slowly. "Investigation is still open. I'm trying to handle insurance." Then I took a screenshot. I saved it. I forwarded it to Daniel. "She knows the origin point." His answer came back 3 minutes later. "Interesting. Keep everything. Do not confront her." Interesting was a cold word for the way my hands were shaking. By evening, the family group chat had become a courtroom where everyone but me had appointed themselves judge. Elaine wrote, "Everyone, Merritt is exhausted, so please do not overwhelm her." But Nana would never have wanted one granddaughter with a whole house, while another granddaughter with children struggles. Blythe posted a photo of Harper and Nolan at the kitchen table, coloring. Her caption said, "Trying to keep life normal for the kids." The replies came fast. "Those babies deserve stability. Family should come before paperwork. Merritt, you can still do the right thing." Then Ren texted me privately. "You do not have to give up everything. But if you shared part of it, this could calm down." Calm down. They did not want the truth. They wanted a version of the story that let them stay kind in their own minds while asking me to pay the price. I screenshotted every message and added each one to the timeline. I did not defend myself. I did not explain. The case was teaching me something my family never had. Silence was not weakness when it was protecting evidence. The next morning at Mercy Oaks, Ada found me at the nurse's station charting with more force than necessary. "You are going to wear out that keyboard," she said. "I'm fine." She leaned against the counter. "You are charting like you're preparing for court." I kept typing. I learned that if you don't write things down, people rewrite them. Ada did not answer right away. Then she said, "Then keep writing." That night, Daniel called while I was sitting in my motel room with a paper cup of vending machine coffee. "I can't give you everything," he said, "but I need to ask you something." "Okay. Do you know anyone in your family who recently used or borrowed a gasoline can?" The motel heater clicked on. I stared at the carpet. "No. If you hear anything, even if it seems small, you call me, not your mother." not your sister. Me. 3 days later, I went to a small memorial service for a distant aunt on my father's side. I almost did not go, but absence in my family always became evidence, and I was tired of letting them build cases out of empty chairs. The funeral home smelled like lilies and burnt coffee. Elaine hugged people with one arm and accepted sympathy that was not hers. Blythe stood near the guest book with Harper pressed against her hip, watching me from across the room. I went to the coffee table because I needed something to do with my hands. That was where Calvin Reed found me. He was 59, a retired mechanic, and he lived 2 doors down from Blythe and Kurt. He poured coffee into a paper cup, shook his head, and said like he was continuing a conversation I had not started. Kurt still owes me a full gas can. Chapter 4. The gas can, the vault, and the letter Nana left behindy looked at him over the rim of my coffee, careful not to let my hand tighten around the cup. What gas can? Calvin blinked like he had forgotten. I was not part of the complaint already. My red 5-gallon can. Kurt borrowed it the Tuesday before your fire. Said he needed it for the mower or maybe the generator. You know Kurt, always got 3 explanations for one thing. My throat felt dry. When was that exactly? Calvin squinted toward the ceiling, searching the date through funeral home lilies and bad coffee. October 15th. He brought it back, Saturday morning, October 19th, empty as a church plate after potluck. I said, Kurt, you borrowed a full can. He just laughed and said it had been a long week. The room kept moving around us. Elaine stood near the guest book, accepting sympathy like she had lost something. Blythe was across the room with one hand on Nolan's shoulder, her face arranged into tired innocence. Kurt stood beside her, looking at his phone. Calvin had no idea he had just placed a match near the center of my life. I kept my voice even. Did he say what he used it for? Nope, and their yard is the size of a bath mat. That mower doesn't drink 5 gallons. He chuckled, then noticed my face. Everything okay? I forced a small nod, just a lot going on. I thanked him, poured coffee I did not want, and walked out through the side door into the funeral home parking lot. The cold air hit my face hard enough to help me breathe. I called Daniel Rivas from beside a row of trimmed hedges. He answered on the second ring. What did you hear? I told him exactly what Calvin had said. Date, amount, return day, Kurt's words. Daniel went quiet for so long that I heard traffic on his end. Then he said, the preliminary lab result came back this morning. I pressed my free hand against the brick wall. The sample from the filing cabinet corner tested positive for gasoline range accelerant. Not electrical, not accidental. We still have more work to do, but this is no longer reading like a simple apartment fire. I looked through the glass door. My mother was touching Blythe's arm. Kurt leaned down to whisper something near Blythe's ear. Ray stood a few feet away, staring into a cup of water like it had instructions written at the bottom. I was not just standing outside a funeral home. I was standing outside my family looking in. Only now, the truth had lab results. Daniel told me Detective Mara Ruiz would contact Calvin officially. He reminded me not to talk to Blythe, not to talk to Kurt, not to try to scare anyone into telling the truth. My job was to stay clean. Their job was to build the case. Calvin called me 2 days later, voice low and nervous. Merritt, some detective came by asking about that can. I didn't mean to get mixed up in anything. You didn't get mixed up, I said. You told the truth about a day. I don't want trouble with Kurt. You don't have to choose a side, Calvin. Just say the date. He breathed out. All right, I can do that. That was how a complaint about borrowed gasoline became a statement. Not dramatic, not cinematic. Just a retired mechanic telling the correct date to the correct person. The next morning, I drove to First County Bank on Main Street with my driver's license in my coat pocket and a small key I had not touched since March. The safe deposit room was colder than I remembered. A teller led me down a short hallway, checked my ID twice, and slid the long metal box onto a private table. When she left me alone, I sat there for a moment before opening it. Inside was the original will, not a copy. Not a scan. The original cream paper, blue ink, embossed seal, Nana Winnie's signature steady at the bottom, like she had pressed her whole life into that line. Beside it was the safe deposit log, a stack of neatly folded papers, and one envelope in Nana's handwriting. For Merritt, when they tell you to be quiet. My fingers shook when I opened it. Nana's letter did not waste words. She had never wasted anything. She wrote that she had watched Elaine call my patience maturity when it was really loneliness. She wrote that she had watched Blythe take up every room she entered, while I learned to make myself useful in the corners. She wrote that she knew they would say Blythe had children, bills, fear, and more need. She knew they would call me strong, so they would not have to help me. Then she wrote the sentence I had needed all my life. Do not shrink, Merritt. You were the one who stayed when staying cost something. I covered my mouth with my hand because the sound that came out of me did not belong in a bank. Nana had not left me Hart House to punish anyone. She had left it to the person who had sat beside her at 2 a.m. when there was no audience, no Facebook photo, no church coffee hour version of sacrifice. Later that afternoon, I met Marla Keene at Keene and Lowell Estate Law. She looked at the original will, then at me, and her face softened for half a second before becoming all business. Your grandmother was very clear, she said. She laid out what she called the clean will package. The original from First County Bank, a certified attorney copy, a doctor's competency letter dated March 6, 2024, stating that Nana understood her assets and her choices, 2 independent witness affidavits from people who were not beneficiaries, scanned timestamps, the safe deposit log from March 14. If they contest this, Marla said, they are not arguing with your feelings. They are arguing with paper. Will that stop them? No. But it will make them bleed credibility every time they try. Then she showed me something pulled from public county records. Blythe and Kurt had received a foreclosure notice on September 30. They needed $37,600 to reinstate the mortgage within 30 days. The fire suddenly had a calendar. Blythe did not need to erase the will forever. She only needed confusion, delay, pressure, a family settlement pushed by guilt before the bank took her house. That night, Elaine called. Her voice was gentle in the way people sound when they have decided to manipulate softly. Honey, if the papers burned, maybe that is God telling us not to fight. Maybe the house should be shared. The investigation is open, I said. I'm not discussing it. Elaine exhaled. Blythe said your apartment was always full of papers anyway. No wonder the fire started there. I sat up slowly. When was Blythe inside my apartment? Silence. Well, I don't know. Maybe she saw pictures. She said she never came in. Merritt, don't turn every little thing into an accusation. I ended the call and added another line to my timeline. Elaine described interior through Blythe. The next morning, Daniel and Detective Mara Ruiz asked me to come in. Mara was 47, compact, direct, with eyes that did not move away when people lied. She placed a sealed evidence bag on the table. Inside was a small piece of blackened brass, enamel burned off at the edges. A lighthouse charm, not a full key ring. Just the charm, snapped from one. I knew it immediately. 2 summers earlier, in Marblehead, I had bought matching lighthouse charms from a gift shop because Blythe and I had begged our parents to take us to see one when we were kids. Mine had stayed in a drawer. Blythe had put hers on her spare key ring, Mara said. This was recovered near the point of origin, by the filing cabinet. The room tilted in a quiet way. Daniel said, We are not asking you to draw conclusions. We are asking you to confirm whether you recognize it. I recognize it, I said. It belonged to my sister. Mara explained the working theory carefully, not as a final accusation, but as the shape the evidence was beginning to take. Blythe had access to the key. The charm placed her key ring near the filing cabinet. Kurt's phone had pinged near Willowbend during the window they were examining. The accelerant tied the fire to gasoline. Calvin's statement tied Kurt to a borrowed gas can. We are not asking you to confront anyone, Mara said. We are telling you why we need you to stay clean and let the case build. I won't confront them, I said, and I meant it. That night, Ray came to the motel alone. He stood outside my door with his shoulders rounded, looking older than 66. For one foolish second, I thought he had come to apologize. Instead, he said, Blythe has Harper and Nolan. If this goes too far, her life is over. I looked at him in the yellow motel light. When my home burned, was I family? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Finally, he said, I don't know what you did. I just know I don't want to know. That was the most honest thing my father had ever said. After he left, Marla texted me, probate hearing confirmed. November 22, 2024. Thomas Greer will contest on undue influence and alleged destruction of your copy in the fire. I closed the folder, set it beside my new Walmart scrubs, and sat very still. For the first time in my life, I was not preparing to keep the peace. I was preparing to tell the truth. Chapter 5: The Hearing, the Report, and the Door I Didn't Open On. November 22, 2024. I walked into Montgomery County Probate Court wearing a black blazer I bought from a thrift store, because the one I owned had burned with everything else. It was not expensive. It did not make me look powerful. It just made me look like someone who had gotten dressed carefully, because the truth deserved clean sleeves. Marla Keene walked beside me with one folder in her hand, and the kind of calm that only comes from knowing exactly what is inside it. Elaine, Ray, Blythe, Kurt, Wren, and half a dozen relatives were already in the hallway. Blythe kept one hand on Harper's shoulder, and Nolan pressed against her side, like a photograph arranged for sympathy. Elaine stood near her, whispering to an aunt from church, her face tight with concern that had arrived too late to be useful. Ray saw Mommy and looked away, did not. She looked straight at me with red eyes and a trembling mouth, the same face she had used as a child when she broke something and waited for someone else to be blamed. Thomas Greer, her attorney, opened with a voice so smooth it almost sounded reasonable. He said Nana Winnie had been elderly. He said she had depended on me during her final 14 months. He said I controlled access to her medications, appointments, and household. He said the will was unnatural because it favored one granddaughter over another. Then he said the copy in my apartment had been destroyed in a tragic fire, and under such emotional circumstances, the family deserved a fair review, maybe even a settlement that honored everyone. It was a polished argument. It only had one problem. It depended on the original will being gone. Marla stood. Your Honor, the original will was never in the apartment. The room changed before anyone spoke. I opened the folder and handed Marla the document from First County Bank. She placed it on the table with the care of someone setting down something heavier than paper. Judge Helena Whitcomb adjusted her glasses and reviewed the embossed seal, Nana's signature, the notary stamp, and the date, March 8, 2024. Blythe's color drained so fast I thought she might faint. Elaine's hand closed around her purse strap. Wren looked from the will to me, and for the first time in months, she did not look certain she knew the story. Marla did not stop there. She submitted the certified attorney copy, the doctor's competency letter dated March 6, the 2 independent witness affidavits, the scanned timestamps, and the safe deposit log from March 14. Everything Nana had prepared, everything Elaine and Blythe had not known existed. Judge Whitcomb looked at Thomas Greer. Are you challenging the authenticity of the original document? Thomas asked for time to review the materials. Marla answered that every document had been disclosed according to the court's deadlines. I sat still. For once, I did not need to explain myself until my throat hurt. I did not need to convince a room full of people that I had loved Nana for more than a house. The paperwork was speaking in a language my family could not interrupt. Then Marla asked for limited testimony from Daniel Rivas, not to try the criminal case, but because Blythe's side had used the fire to imply the will materials had vanished in an accident. Daniel took the stand and kept his answers narrow. He was not there to accuse anyone in probate court. He was there only because Blythe's side had used the fire to suggest the will materials disappeared in an accident. He confirmed that the fire origin was near the filing cabinet, that the burn pattern was not consistent with an ordinary electrical accident, that preliminary lab testing showed gasoline range accelerant, and that the investigation remained open. He also confirmed that a small metal item connected to a key ring had been recovered near the point of origin. He never said Blythe was guilty. He did not have to. Judge Whitcomb asked a procedural question about who had access to my apartment in the week before the fire. Thomas Greer started to rise, probably to control Blythe's answer, but Blythe was already cracking. She wasn't supposed to have the original. Silence fell so completely that even Nolan stopped shifting in his seat. Thomas touched her arm. Blythe, stop talking. She tried to recover. I mean, if she had been honest from the beginning, none of this would be happening. But the first sentence had already landed. She had not said the will was fake. She had not said Nana was confused. She had said I was not supposed to have the original. Elaine leaned toward her and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. Blythe, stop. We can fix this. I turned and looked at my mother. Like you were going to fix my apartment burning? Elaine's mouth opened, then closed. Ray lowered his head. Wren looked down at her phone, the same phone where she had read every message Blythe sent about me being greedy, manipulative, selfish, dramatic. Judge Whitcomb did not rule on the fire. She did not rule on guilt. She ruled on probate. Nana Winnie had capacity. The will was valid. There was no sufficient evidence of undue influence. Hart House on Sycamore Lane passed according to the will. To me, I did not celebrate. I did not smile at Blythe. I did not look at Elaine and say I told you so. Winning did not bring back my apartment, my clothes, or Nana's framed photo. It did not give me back the mother I had hoped would come when I was in danger, but it gave the truth a place to stand. A few days later, Detective Mara Ruiz called. The criminal case was separate, exactly as it should have been. Blythe was arrested on aggravated arson, conspiracy, and false statements to investigators. Kurt was questioned separately. When he learned Blythe was trying to make it sound like he had acted alone, his loyalty collapsed in less than an hour. He told them Blythe took the key. Blythe knew my work schedule. Blythe believed the papers in my apartment would burn. The plan was not genius. It was desperate. Delay probate, create confusion, push me into a settlement, and get money before the foreclosure swallowed their house. Kurt admitted he borrowed Calvin Reed's gas can and used the accelerant after Blythe confirmed where the filing cabinet was. Elaine was questioned too. She had known too much about my apartment. She had asked about the Hart papers too quickly, but there was not enough evidence to prove she helped before the fire, so she was not arrested. Her punishment came quieter. The church circle heard. The relatives heard. Wren told the family group chat that Blythe had lied and that I had the documents all along. Ray stopped correcting people when they said Elaine had protected the wrong daughter. My mother lost the thing she had guarded more fiercely than she ever guarded me. Her version of the story. After the court order was final, I unlocked Hart House. The house smelled like old wood, paper, and the peppermint tea Nana used to drink in the afternoons. For a long time, I stood in the front hall with the key in my hand, listening to the quiet. I did not feel like a winner. I felt like a person who had carried something through fire and finally found a place to set it down. I did not turn Hart House into a trophy. I cleared the front room, painted the walls a soft cream, brought in a couch, a coffee maker, blankets, and a small bookshelf. With Ada's help at Mercy Oaks, it became the Winnie Hart Respite Room, a place where families of hospice patients could sit for a few hours, drink coffee, cry privately, or sleep without folding themselves into a hospital chair. Lillian Price died before the room was finished. Her daughter was the first person to sit there. She held a paper cup of coffee in both hands and whispered, "Mom would have liked this." I thought of Lillian asking me, "Nurse Merritt, who is taking care of you today?" For the first time, I had an answer. I was learning. A few weeks later, Wren came to the porch and apologized. She did not ask to come in. She just stood on the steps and said, "I believed Blythe because her story was easier than yours." I accepted the apology. I did not offer instant warmth. I had learned that forgiveness given too quickly sometimes becomes another chore people assign to the injured person. Near Christmas, Elaine and Ray came to Hart House. They stood on the porch where I had once stood outside their door, homeless and smelling of smoke. Elaine looked smaller without an audience. "Can we put this behind us?" she asked. "No," I said, "but we can start by not calling the truth drama." Ray's voice was low. "You were always strong." Elaine almost said it. I saw the old sentence rise in her face. "You always land on your feet." But she stopped. I said, "I can stand up. That does not mean you get to knock me down and call it strength." I did not slam the door. I did not open it wide either. I told them if they wanted to begin again, they could write to me, tell the truth, and stop using the word family like a bill I owed. Then I stepped back inside. In the front room, a hospice family sat quietly under Nana Winnie's old quilt. The coffee maker hummed. Nana's photo watched over the hallway. Hart House was not proof that I had won a fight over property. It was proof that the person who stayed had finally been seen. If you have ever been called strong just so people could abandon you, tell me in the comments. And if you had been in my place, would you have stayed quiet for family? Or handed every piece of evidence to the investigator?